No amendment. No debate. Earth's motion is denied. The sentence snapped across the council dome like a whip. The tribunal's amphitheater, tiered in spiraled rows of obsidian seating, fell briefly silent. Then came the sound of rearranged robes, casual exhalations, and filtered laughter, the kind passed between predators who believed the hunt was over. Envoy Valeric Tren didn't flinch. He stood at the center table, surrounded by 32 alien delegates, each elevated above him, literally and symbolically. The diplomatic chamber's upper vents hissed recycled air down in chilled streams. Laser plasma displays flickered against the curved ceiling, updating votes in slow, deliberate patterns. Councillor Resk Doron rose from his throne on the highest tier, his jointed fingers splayed over the carved edge. His skin glistened with iridescent overlays, grafted metals embedded into each shoulder. With deliberate motion, he picked up the parchment copy of Earth's clause, a ceremonial relic more than a document. This clause, he said, holding it between two fingers, offered us Terran schematics for water logic converters and relay lattice blueprints. He turned toward the chamber's interior with a half-smile. They called it a gift. A few chuckles slipped from the upper benches, subdued but sharp. Doron paused theatrically. Yet even their gifts, he continued, come with decay dates. He tore the document in half, slowly, deliberately. Fibers strained audibly before parting. Below, Valeric's gaze did not shift. His boots remained aligned with the engraved council crest beneath his feet, his diplomatic coat uncreased, the collar folded perfectly against the hollow of his throat. He blinked once, no fury, no surprise, just a final calibration of silence. Doron let the torn halves drift downward. They landed beside Valeric with a dry flutter. "You may go," Doron said with a dismissive tilt of his chin. The words echoed louder than the applause that followed. Valeric stepped back from the speaker's platform. The heads-up display behind him still pulsed with Earth's rejected clause, marked now in muted red, flashing once before vanishing from the session record. He didn't turn to the human delegation seated at the lower arc. He didn't signal. He simply moved. Behind him, 5 Terran envoys rose in synchrony. No words passed between them. Their boots struck the marble floor with soft spaced impacts, measured enough to sound like punctuation. Each delegate carried nothing but their presence. No briefcases, no tablets, no records. Everything had already been delivered, and refused. The chamber doors opened without announcement. No music played, no herald stepped forward. Earth walked out alone. As they disappeared into the side corridor, murmurs returned like rain against glass. The chamber, bloated with comfort and condensation from species not native to oxygen-heavy atmospheres, smelled of nutrient vapor, salted skin excretions, and ink from active scrollwork. It was the scent of politics soaked in self-regard. Doron slouched back into his seat, pleased. A whisper from Varn Exok, a lizard-throated envoy from the Rylith conglomerate, slithered up to his tier. So much drama for a supplier of relay boxes. Doron didn't respond immediately. He activated his private feed, scrolling Earth's exit treaty on a side panel. Words shimmered: interspatial contribution clause 44 above, acknowledged and non-renegotiable. He tapped the display away. A relay box, he murmured, mostly to himself, is useless without a relay path. Down in the corridor, the humans walked in silence. The sound of their passage echoed oddly, too sharp, too clinical. A custodial drone swiveled out of their way without command. Overhead, red indicator lights marked restricted security zones. Terran envoys walked through them without delay. No one stopped them. No one challenged their right to leave. Valeric paused beside the sealed exit arch. His hand hovered for a moment over the control plate. A faint blue glow traced his fingerprint as he engaged the override. The corridor iris opened. Rain hit instantly. Verdanus Prime's upper atmosphere excreted condensation in irregular, acidic gusts. It streaked down the glass walls of the observation causeway ahead, smearing the city's skyline into angular blurs. Buildings bristled with antenna towers and thermal fins, architectural statements of hierarchy and control. Valeric stepped into the rain without lifting his coat's hood. He let the water run down his neck, collecting in the folds of the collar. His hands remained at his sides, unclenched. Beside him, Merrick Strawn, Earth's operations liaison adjusted a side pin on his lapel. Do we confirm clause Theta RX? Valerk's eyes tracked the nearest shuttle tower. Inside, beyond a translucent panel, a fleet of atmospheric transports stood idle. Ships Earth had been banned from using just hours ago. He responded without inflection. Confirmed. Strawn tilted his head. We'll be off-planet in 20 minutes. Valerk nodded once. Ensure they notice when we're gone. Behind them Harn Vosik, Earth's interspatial lexicographer, extracted a sealed capsule from his coat. It bore no symbols, no lights, no instructions. He placed it against the outer tribunal wall, at a junction point no one else would have thought to check. It bonded to the surface without sound. A second later, its light faded. Relay route unlocked, Vosik said softly. Timer active, masking stable. No one responded. They didn't need to. Inside the council chamber, Doron had settled into a story about Earth's outdated philosophy of technical contribution over strategic alliance. Delegates leaned forward, enjoying his barbed delivery. A few clicked their mandibles in amusement. No one mentioned the humans' expressionless exit. No one asked why no Earth envoy had looked back. Outside, lightning crawled sideways across the sky, faint, violet, and erratic. The temperature dropped rapidly. A layer of vapor formed along the observation deck railings. Valerk stood still, looking out across the capital's shielded towers. His reflection in the glass stood just behind the real city, slightly smaller, sharper in its lines. Behind him, the door sealed. Earth is gone, one technician logged on the central Concord registry node. The terminal updated accordingly, removing Terran access from the diplomatic zone. The technician noticed the system stutter briefly, then correct itself. He marked it as latency, logged it, moved on. Inside Earth's shuttle, the cabin lights dimmed automatically as the entry hatch sealed. Heads-up displays shimmered to life with departure clearances already processed. The route out of Concord airspace appeared, blinking green, no resistance filed. Valerk took his seat. No deviation, said Strawn, reviewing the nav stream. We gave them everything. Valerk said. No one replied. Outside, Earth's ship ascended through the rain. The engines left no plume. No roar, just a subtle parting of vapor. In the tribunal chamber, Doron looked up as an aide whispered something in his ear. The humans have cleared orbit, the aide said. Doron arched a brow. Without incident? They filed nothing. No protest, no condition. Doron leaned back, rubbing the edge of his thumb against a metal implant at his wrist. They always overplayed formality. Let them sulk in silence. The aide hesitated. Shall I file the clause termination? Doron nodded. Permanently. Across the city, the quiet rain continued. And on 1,000 networks connected through Concord's lattice, Earth's quiet departure registered as a minor loss of protocol synchronization. Then another, and another. The pattern had just begun. The junction node didn't respond. The voice crackled across the maintenance deck of Rhinex station, low, clipped, and uneasy. Technician Corvalens stared at the heads-up display mounted on the panel in front of him. What should have been a smooth sequence of green arcs now danced erratically, gaps flickering open and shut like a faulty pulse. I rerouted through the auxiliary gate, but it's refusing to handshake, he added. On the other end, Supervisor Theron Dask exhaled through his nose, a habit born of repetition, not frustration. Node model, G-class. One of the Terran-linked hybrids. Silence clung to the reply, not hostile, just heavy. The same silence one hears when something mechanical clicks shut behind them. Dask leaned against a railing above the energy control well, arms folded. The vault beneath him churned with refraction coils, streams of coolant vapor skimming the walls. No alarms blared, no fire, just patterns that no longer made sense. I thought those were standardized to Concord Protocol 2 cycles ago, Dask said. So did I. A red glyph blinked in the top right corner of Valen's display, translation loop initiated, and then died. The panel rebooted itself without his input. On the agri-platform Moon Vetheran 6, a different pulse failed. The rotational grav rings shuddered to a halt mid-cycle, sending cargo bins tumbling from suspension rails. In Dock 7, stacked crates of Terran-grown stem bark shattered open, sending pale filaments cascading across the floor like stripped insulation. Inside the transport hub, Deputy Foreman Jursk Tavel knelt beside the root bed control system, its interface flickering between error codes and blank light strips. "Grav relay went dead," asked his assistant. "No," Tavel muttered, tapping the panel edge. "It's worse. It thinks it's active. The signal's feeding a ghost path." Behind them, the air vibrated faintly with the sound of containment units rebooting. Again, a subtle tremor ran up the walls, like breath held too long. Nothing fell, yet nothing moved either. Not truly. On Velrican Orbital, energy was the first thing to misbehave. The shield towers began redrawing heat signatures across the station's skin, not shielding from incoming threats, just cycling their own interior temperatures, as if compensating for something invisible. The result was chaos in the admin ring. Door seals failed, lights dimmed. The meal preparation line dispensed frozen packs labeled for 2 cycles ago. "You tell me how a defense node reroutes itself into kitchen supply," barked Commander Anthen Grail, throwing the spoiled ration onto the floor where it split like old bark. Behind him, the station's diagnostic officer shook his head, too tired to guess. No enemy signals, no intrusion, just mismatched codes in the root frame. Down in the maintenance ducts, the heat mapping systems pulsed in a rhythm they didn't recognize. No pattern, no anchor point, just a repeating whisper. "Missing relay path. Request Terran parse confirmation." Back on Verdanus Prime, the same city that had watched Earth walk away, now found its inner tram grid stalled at 6 intersections. Carriages hung suspended between stations, no movement, no mechanical failure, just inertia with nowhere to route. Counselor Resk Doran didn't notice at first. His personal transport had rerouted through diplomatic airlift corridors. The weather tower failed to sync with his travel window, but the pilot blamed altitude band shifts and filed a manual override. In the chamber beneath the summit vault, the capital's atmospheric processing bureau suffered a different issue. CO-Con conversion tanks did not stop working, but their regulation cycles now followed a schedule removed during last year's maintenance overhaul. The old schedule, the one hard-coded into legacy Terran partitions. Technician Jal Vorant, young, confident, and always slightly amused by Terran over-engineering, stared at the cycle list in front of him. The timestamp flashed once. It was dated 47 years prior. What the hell's referencing a buried timestamp? The system responded by cycling again. 3 Atmos processing towers switched to oxygen minimization mode, usually triggered during mass evacuation drills. Outside, citizens didn't notice the air thinning. Not yet. The rain had stopped, the clouds had pulled back, but even then, the wind carried a strange absence, as if it passed between more than it touched. Inside Concord's Relay Synchronization Bureau, things moved faster, or rather slower, then out of order, then backward. Each galaxy-spanning node processed at impossible intervals. Not error, not failure, just something other than standard Concord relay behavior. "Someone's feeding the node a recursive anchor," said Director Koveth Narn, hunched over a table crowded with projection rods and translated query chains. An external command, no, internal, from the sublayer. It's calling its own previous state as a valid route, overriding fresh instructions. How's that possible? Narn turned toward the junior analyst beside him. Because it doesn't believe the new ones are real. No one laughed. Elsewhere, water filtration plants on Sarni's Delta fell below drinkable efficiency thresholds without warning. The auto-diagnosis software looped endlessly, referencing maintenance guidelines only stored in Earth-designed legacy codices. Cargo manifests on Corian Station reordered their own schedules, favoring non-existent Terran-bound ships. A pulse beacon on the outer rim sector blinked once into the void. It used an outdated coordination format, long since deprecated by Concord Tech. The system labeled it error, and yet, the relay repeated it. Again, and again. Heads-up displays at border stations began reporting unsupported registry tag, Earth-rooted protocol layer detected, but no one could remove them. Each deletion command was overwritten on the next cycle. In Concord Fleet Command's central hub, a tactical officer monitoring strategic node feeds stepped back from his console. He pressed both palms against the table. The network diagram had rearranged itself, lines that once stretched clean between communication hubs now rerouted awkwardly. A lattice had formed, subtle, asymmetrical, and completely invisible until now. "Sir," the officer said, voice low. "What is it?" came the gruff reply from the deckmaster. "I think we've built everything on top of a Terran frame." The deckmaster frowned. That would have triggered an audit, only if they left a signature. What if they didn't? Across every station, platform and ship relying on shared Terran schematic integration, unseen beneath the skin of Concord's confidence, errors accumulated like blood clots in a sealed lung. Not explosions, not warheads, not alarms, just absence where there should be rhythm. Missing confirmations, non-compliant updates, systems remembering their original instructions more clearly than the ones recently forced upon them. And still, no signal from Earth, no threat, no demand, only systems forgetting how to obey anyone else. In Rhynex Station's maintenance vault, Cor Valen stared at the now blank panel. No error message, no recovery loop, just a single word left on the display before it went dark: compliance. "It's not a failure," Jurek Pellin said, his voice flat as a ledger strike. "It's compliance drift." The words echoed inside Chamber 16. Deep beneath the Concord legal citadel, the audit floor was windowless, air thick with sterilizing ions that left a bitter taste on the tongue. 8 tri-helix scanners hovered motionless above the primary arbitration table, their curved arms blinking in asynchronous spirals. "Drift from what?" muttered Alvorn Kesht, Concord Systems Law Liaison, fingers twitching against the rim of his tablet's encryption sheath. Pellin didn't look up. His eyes were glued to the scrolling archive feeds projected across 3 adjacent laser plasma panels. The overlays flickered through decades of contracts, annex clauses and buried drafts, each tagged with registry timestamps that danced in paired columns like adversaries locked in ritual. "There's a core template the systems are reverting to," Pellin replied. "Not malicious, not infected. Reversion." Kesht leaned forward. "You're saying the infrastructure doesn't trust us anymore?" "No," Pellin said, tone clipped. "I'm saying it never did." At the center of the chamber, the primary node lit up with a rare watermark, Solven Var. The file was old, archival patched, last reviewed 52 cycles prior. A dull tremor spread across the legal pit's circular rim as the citation linked into view. Kesht squinted. That name again. Pellin stood, smoothing his jacket in one fluid movement, the kind that said ritual, not nerves. Treaty engineer, Earth's chief clause architect during the Relay Accord drafting period. And this file was what? A footnote. Pellin turned. It was the keystone. Around them, 12 observers sat in tiered silence. None spoke. Even the display readers slowed to compensate for clause recognition syncing. Across the top tier, Chief Registrar Delith Irvin exhaled through his side vent slits, expression unreadable. "Present your finding," Irvin instructed, voice dry as compressed bark. Pellin walked to the center dais. 37% of Concord's root frame infrastructure operates through converted lattice nodes designed by Terran relay engineers. This was accepted under Treaty 94 Beta, following the logistics collapses on Halvanar outposts. "That's common knowledge," Kesht interrupted. Pellin didn't pause. "What isn't common knowledge is that every node was deployed with recursive authentication logic linked to Earth's lexicon schema, encrypted under non-transferable interpretation licenses." He tapped his reader once. Laser plasma displays shifted. Across one wall, a clause map exploded into a sprawling grid, each node tied to another by braided chains of protocol. One clause shimmered brighter than the rest. Theta Oryx. Irvin sat forward. Kesht blinked. That clause was ceremonial. Pellin's tone flattened. No, it was surgical. The room fell still. Only the low oscillation of document refresh cycles filled the air, a sound like paper being turned in an empty archive. Pellin rotated the view. Clause Theta Oryx expanded, displaying a woven syntax trail in Earth-standard legal phrasing, not technical, not military. Pure law. Clause Theta Oryx non-detachment provision. All Terran root frame contributions are bound to their contextual lexicon interpreter. Separation from Terran interpretive authority, without compliant re-indexing, shall result in deferred protocol reversion. Such reversion is not sabotage. It is self-defense. A thin silence crept across the chamber. Kasht's voice cracked when he finally spoke. Deferred reversion means fallback. That's not dangerous. Fallback to what state? Pellin asked calmly. Every fallback protocol in Earth's core designs predates Concord's registry. Kasht went still. Pellin turned back to the archive feed. They didn't build dependencies. They built mirrors. Every system built on their architecture thinks Earth is the authority. Without them, it defaults to Earth's last valid signature. Every locked pathway, every translator node, turns backward. Irvin's mouth twitched. We approve this. Pellin rotated the clause overlay. A timestamp slid into view. Council vote, Resk Dorun presiding. Passed by margin 12-5. Registered as a neutral clause under the Open Systems Exchange Act. Kasht wiped his forehead. Why didn't we audit this sooner? Pellin pointed to the screen's corner. A file label blinked. Classification level C rust. Because Dorun marked it culturally sensitive, non-critical, ceremonial. No one reviewed it again. In the lower seats, a junior clerk dropped his pen. It hit the floor with a crack. Irvin stood slowly. What does Theta Oryx give them? Pellin's expression didn't shift. Everything. He stepped aside and allowed the feed to cascade downward. Infrastructure overlays mapped sector by sector. Grav-train synchronization lattices. Water processing hierarchies. Energy modulation layers. All traced back to a root frame signature tagged with Ver originated. None of these systems recognize Concord authority anymore, Pellin said. They're not shutting down. They're unbinding. Kasht crossed the chamber, staring at the central display. They're not attacking us. No, Pellin agreed. They're walking away. Irvin's eyes narrowed. If clause Theta Oryx is valid, Concord authorized its trigger. We did, Pellin said. By ejecting Earth and declaring their motion void, we invalidated their access while leaving their systems in place. That counted as unilateral detachment. Kasht stepped back from the display, face pale. We triggered their clause ourselves. Pellin nodded once. And the clause doesn't need Earth to respond. It acts by design. No warships, no commands, just reversion. From the far end of the chamber, the legal AI processor blinked a warning. The interpreter node feeding the archive had dropped access. Not disabled, detached. The clause scroll shimmered once more, Earth's watermark pulsing faintly across the base, a laurel-wrapped globe flanked by non-aligned text. Kasht whispered, "Can we nullify it?" Pellin didn't answer, because he knew the answer wasn't legal. It was terminal. Target locked. But it's not moving. Commander Virathanol narrowed his secondary eyes, 4 pupils narrowing in sequence as the targeting reticle refused to stabilize. The object hovered 3,000 kilometers off Vostrik's orbital, a lifeless pod-shaped mass flagged by long-range surveillance as a Tier 2 priority. No ID signature. No comms. Just shape, drift, and echo. He leaned over the console, staring at the vector line blinking across the heads-up display. Magnify. A sharp click followed. The object remained grainy despite enhanced optics. Pocked surface. Dull ridges. No heat bleed. No navigation tags. Dead cargo? Asked Sub-Officer Nair Dalan, glancing sideways. Enol didn't answer. The signal flared again, barely perceptible. A flicker of radiation in the low-mass band, the kind you'd see from outdated buoy cores or recycled colony crates. Except this one pulsed on a Terran fallback frequency. Deploy ScoutNet, cautious grid, no pursuit. His voice came low, not from fear, but because something in his bones disliked the silence it came from. 6 scout drones peeled from the fleet line, spiraling outward with soft engine trails. Their sensor probes extended like pronged thorns, brushing against the radiation veil, enclosing the object. Dalan winced. Something's refracting the return. Explain. They're not reading surface consistency. They're reading their own signal bouncing through a lens. Inside the war room aboard Concord cruiser Arathal, the tactical table lit with 5 more contact anomalies. All bore matching geometry, spaced across seemingly random debris fields scattered through the outer ring sectors. Who left them? Asked one analyst. Who knew to look for them? Murmured another. In the bastion beneath Earth's lunar vault, Merrick Strand stood before a display lined with 35 red-linked shards. Each one bore a timestamp. All were dormant. Begin ignition rotation, he said. No ceremony followed. The command traveled through layered relays, disguised beneath old logistics pings. Not a single Concorde scanner registered the shift. The detonation wasn't kinetic, it was interpretive. Each Shardwake node, buried in orbital debris centuries old, uncoiled in silence. Internally, they unraveled encryption strings faster than Concorde mapping AI could process. Their broadcast wasn't signal, it was illusion. Sector-wide sensor fields began reporting phantom signatures, full-scale heat signatures, mimicking entire Terran fleets where there were none. Gravitational ripple effects distorted prediction charts. Shadows appeared on asteroid scans, as if ships phased between rocks. AI combat forecasts recalculated every 5 seconds. None agreed. At Counselor Dorun's private defense outpost, the planetary shield flickered twice. No impact, no breach, just a deviation in field harmonics. Static crawled across the external tower arrays like frost, crawling without temperature. Multiple incursions in the outer layers, the defense marshal snapped. Unknown vessel types, they're not real, his lieutenant said. Prove it. On Veltherin Naval Array, 7 Concorde cruisers broke formation chasing heat, echoes that drifted ahead of them by nanoseconds, recalibrating, based on the ship's own emissions. They're feeding us ourselves, Captain Cran Voshel muttered, teeth clenched. It's our wake, mirrored back. And then the burst triggered. Shardwake node #07, camouflaged as a mining relay, released a localized inversion loop into the fleet's routing frame. It didn't damage hulls, it didn't pierce shields, it rewrote how the ships understood their own orientation. Fleet-wide navigational drift, 7.3 degrees, uncorrectable. Ships began turning away from one another, mistaking each other for hostiles as threat verification chains spiraled. Lock overrides, Voshel barked. Manual control only. Too late. In the space of 7 seconds, 4 capital ships broke alignment. 2 collided, their shields mismatched by 2 microseconds. 1 drifted directly into an automated defense corridor and triggered a friendly kill beacon. No Terran ships had fired a shot. In Earth's bastion, Thalvin Chris watched the response data ripple back through the covert relay. His hands hovered over the tactical interface, not touching. Not yet. They still believe it's an ambush, he said. Merrick nodded. Let them. Back in the Concorde's deep space conflict nexus, alarms began to trip across dozens of sectors, not from impact, not from visual confirmation, from absence. Entire sectors blinked dark, not destroyed, but desynchronized. Node collapse in Sector 4C. Why? No signal authority. Inject fallback. Fallback requests defaulted to pre-conversion parameters. Those are Earth-coded, then override them. We can't. The override routes back into the ghost lattice. Another Shardwake node unraveled itself above the moon Jessenar. Its passive projection wrapped a planetary surveillance hub in refracted distortion. None of the scanners failed. They simply saw something else, a looping image of intact orbital lanes when they were already decaying. The deception didn't confuse by mimicry. It disoriented through overconfidence. On Vostrik's orbital, Commander Anol stared at the floating pod. It hadn't moved. What's the last reading? No change. He stepped away from the display. Recall all scouts. Dallin hesitated. We still have lock. Then that's the problem. As they turned the ships back, the node triggered one final output, a sector-wide loop that flagged Earth's registry not as hostile, but required. The entire defense system froze. In Bastion, Merrick exhaled. Shardwake implementation phase complete. Thalvin didn't smile. They'll blame their maps before they blame their architects. Merrick walked toward the command shaft. That buys us exactly enough time. For what? Merrick turned once. For them to understand it wasn't sabotage, it was architecture. Relay Core 7 is dead. It's not lag. It's not corrupted. It doesn't exist anymore. The words were not shouted. Registrar Vayer Lawn spoke them like an obituary. Standing alone in the corridor above the Concorde Registry's central node chamber, below him, hundreds of heads-up displays stuttered, blinked, then fell into static. Technicians scrambled between terminal spires, voices clipped, eyes wide. The floor, once humming with color-coded indicators, now resembled a failed heartbeat, flat lines pulsing crimson across the lattice, like blood draining from a severed spine. Patch it through the CERN loop, barked one systems overseer. There is no loop, replied a voice from the mezzanine. The buffer's blank. Registry tags are gone. Veyer Lawn descended the stairs without urgency. A century ago, this chamber served as the central organ of interstellar coordination. Every shipment, vote, legal enforcement, and diplomatic route depended on the backbone index, the sublayer lattice integrating Concord space. Now the index showed nothing. Not missing values. Not an overload. Just void. Like the spine had been pulled from a body still trying to walk. Someone pulled the core string, murmured the senior archivist at the third panel. No, Lawn corrected. Someone wrote it to vanish when we weren't looking. Across Terravac Station, Auxiliary Command tried to open a diplomatic channel to Verdanus Prime. The console replied with a query loop. Destination key invalid. Retry. They retried. The system asked again, and again. Within the Ost relocation fleet, 100 civilian transports orbiting in stacked hold formation watched their star charts dissolve in segments. Local star designations blinked into placeholder code, unlinked.star.00x. Traffic coordinators panicked as their own authority files purged from existence. The override command was returned empty, as if the chain of command had never existed. How does a directory erase itself? Asked Fleet Captain Navan. It didn't erase, said his comms officer. It collapsed backward. The sensor dome across his ship's upper deck dimmed by degrees, as though the galaxy beyond were being swallowed line by line. Not by shadow, not by weapon, but by administrative absence. On Krell Shire, a frontier logistics hub near the border with the Veltran Arc, power grid harmonics fell out of phase without fluctuation in demand. The control unit defaulted to emergency handoffs, only to find no registered recipient nodes. Council Designation 3 Zeta, one technician called out. That sector no longer validates, came the monotone reply from the system itself. Inside Concord Naval Operations, fleet commanders attempted to issue routing commands. The central console flashed a warning they had never seen before. Route frame relay unavailable, authority latch not found. What does that mean? Hissed the commander. Where's the fallback? The AI offered nothing. The fallback system had no location to fall back to. Earth systems had not just deactivated, they had revoked recognition. Elsewhere, Counselor Resk Dorun watched a schematic of the Concord's communication map vanish segment by segment. Sector rings dulled from white to gray, then blinked into off-black silence. The council chamber behind him echoed with quiet panic, rustling robes, muttered calls, pages being flung open for non-existent procedures. Get me the bastion, Dorun ordered. Which bastion? Asked his aide. The only one, Dorun snapped. The heads-up display returned a blank reply. Signal path undefined. On the Zarnid trade spire, merchant guilds screamed into dead channels. Contracts vanished from registry records. Revenue chains ceased updating. One merchant screamed that the Galactic debt base had evaporated, his personal fortune erased by a system that no longer acknowledged transaction histories. At Lenvar Diplomatic Hold, planetary governors tried to sync their policy grids. Consensus algorithms returned. Majority tag conflict. Central anchor missing. Back in the registry chamber, Registrar Lawn watched the last active panel cycle itself off. The display didn't flicker. It didn't die. It simply ceased recognizing its own presence. He turned to the technician behind him. Find the fallback, any node with surviving lineage authority. There is none, the tech replied. The last time-stamped registry trail was tied to Earth. Lawn looked away, his voice quiet. And we cut them out. At that same moment, far beneath the Concord Capitol, a forgotten relay server blinked once, its access light showing green. Inside, a query ran silently, traced from a buried clause embedded decades earlier. It read Concord Registry Anchor, deleted by signed clause, reversion status, final. In Earth's bastion, Merrick Strawn looked across the strategic board. All displays were black, not failed, silent. You said it would take days, said Thalvin Chris. Strawn folded his hands. That was before they mocked the ink. What now? Strawn turned. Now nothing. They can't speak. They can't move. They can't hear themselves die. Back in the Concord core, the last registry screen lit up with a phrase. Frame excised. Command path severed. End of line. You don't fire back at a signature. Counselor Resk Doran slammed his open palm against the deposition table, claws scraping over the embedded seal of Concord's authority. The strike echoed flatly across the tribunal core. No one flinched. The chamber's ambient filters hummed through floor panels, keeping the air sharp and brittle, as if sterilizing the room between accusations. Across from him, Harn Vosik stood motionless. Earth's interspatial compliance archivist had arrived without guards, without insignia, and without an explanation. His slate coat held no rank pattern. His boots bore no emblem. He had entered unannounced, yet no sentry had stopped him. Not one protocol had triggered. The council chamber's tiered seating remained half-filled. Delegates who'd survived the blackout watched through narrowed pupils and dampened dignity. Heads-up displays, repaired just enough to cast deposition streams, replayed Earth's exit timestamp on loop. Doran gestured violently. They severed our coordination lattice, undermined our central node structure, and now you claim there's no breach. Vosik placed a small device on the center pillar. The heads-up display above it sprang to life, projecting dual clauses side by side, treaty clause, 94 beta, and withdrawal addendum, theta RX. He didn't raise his voice. You ratified both, separately, fully. No revision filed. Doran leaned forward. That clause was ceremonial. Vosik blinked once, slow and deliberate. Your council stamped it with structural nullity exception. That's not ceremonial. That's irrevocable. To the left, Kovith Narn, still visibly strained from the registry collapse, spoke into the low silence. What about the severance of the relay index? We can't file internal actions. That's system sabotage. Vosik activated a sequence. The clause displayed a new layer, subarticle x.c, marked conditional authority, persistence. Every Concord member, Vosik said, signed away root frame ownership in exchange for access licenses. Subarticle Ni states clearly, upon unilateral retraction, licensed systems shall disengage per lexicon-defined schema. You cannot sabotage what was never yours. Doran's lip curled. They destroyed interstellar navigation. They withdrew from hosting it. The chamber's temperature felt colder than regulation. It wasn't the filters, it was the erosion of assumption. A legal observer 2 rows back scrolled rapidly through her private citation feed. One clause after another affirmed what Vosik presented. Each treaty led back to Earth's interpreter key. Each concession, negotiated decades earlier, documented with timestamp, signature, and cross-council approval. On the center display, a blinking icon appeared. A full ledger of Earth's procedural withdrawal, sequential timestamped, witnessed. The last entry bore a single status, compliance recorded. Doran stared at it. His voice dropped. You waited until we mocked you, until we invalidated your motion. Vosik didn't move. Clause theta RX activates only when all conditions are met. Mockery was not a trigger. Your vote was. Another delegate tried to intervene. Earth's timing was calculated. You must acknowledge weaponized timing as an act of war. Vosik rotated the display again. A side pane listed Concord's ratified timeline for treaty autonomy duration. It included Article 3, Section 11. Time of withdrawal is at member discretion. No reason must be given. No approval may be sought. Doran gritted his teeth. We demand compensation for critical infrastructure loss. Vosik tapped the interface. Earth's compliance packet opened to the final condition. All technologies donated were licensed, not gifted. All blueprints remain interpretive locked. Withdrawal nullifies use. A whisper rippled through the seats. It was not surprise. It was admission. Each delegate had once skimmed those clauses. None had understood what Terran interpretive locked infrastructure meant. Now they knew. Kovith exhaled hard. Even if we declare them hostile, we have no legal standing. Doran snarled. We'll bypass legal standing. Vosik finally stepped closer. Just one pace. Then you become what Earth was accused of being. Rogue, non-compliant, breaching a structure you helped build. He let the weight settle. No sanctions will carry. No summons will bind. Your jurisdiction has no voice. To the right, one of the surviving logistics ministers leaned over her notes, then stood, her voice thin but clear. Has Earth issued any demands? Vosik shook his head. Only a log. She blinked. A message. A system echo. One phrase. Doran glared. Which was? Vosik brought it up, projected at full scale across the tribunal wall. Compliance recorded. Nothing more, no threat, no justification, just the digital acknowledgement of obligation fulfilled. Vosik turned away without ceremony. Where are you going? Doran demanded. Earth does not require a statement. The record speaks for itself. As Vosik passed the threshold, the council chamber remained silent. Doran finally slumped into his seat. The heads-up display still looped Earth's clause packet, every line airtight, every term signed, and nothing left to retaliate against, just the weight of perfectly legal disappearance. Something's returned, whispered Auditor Phelan Dask, as the heads-up display blinked without a source tag. The message did not arrive through military channels. No encryption, no authentication loop. It bypassed traffic gates entirely and seeded itself through inert infrastructure, thermal regulators, defunct transit mirrors, abandoned relay cores. One by one, each lit for less than a breath, projected a single phrase, and dimmed again. Compliance, recorded. No timestamp, no origin path, no Terran seal, just the phrase, rendered in base code so old, it translated itself into every known dialect without request. On Veltrax's Prime, logistics overseer Harren Vok dropped his stylus onto the polished table. It rolled, clattered against the edge, and fell. He didn't move to retrieve it. Around him, department heads stared at the message rippling across their planning wall. No motion in the room, just the glow of dying syntax, flickering clause threads dissolving one line at a time, as if embarrassed to remain on display. Can we respond? Someone muttered. Vok didn't answer. He watched the wall until the projection faded to black. At Concord Defense Oversight, 12 generals received the message simultaneously. Each had attempted a response. Each watched the return stream collapse into a closed loop. A single character blinked on the input panel. No protocol to trace, no handshake sequence to pursue, just silence, filled with proof. Purge all remaining Terran registry, said General Voshan Drake. Already tried, replied his adjutant. Each purge command routes to legacy root frames. They rebuild as they're deleted, then destroy the nodes. Name one you can find. The room fell into shadow as secondary power rerouted to keep tactical simulation feeds alive. The projections struggled to draw borders. With no functional maps, the simulations drew wide arcs, dotted with static. A few turned entirely black. In the Selnir archives, preservation techs attempted to excise Earth-related frameworks from legal catalogs. Their redaction scripts failed mid-operation, corrupted by clause inheritance errors. One terminal bricked itself, its final line frozen across the surface. Earth's withdrawal observed. Dependency preserved. Burn it, the archivist hissed. Doesn't matter, said his assistant. Every copy pulled from the last distributed node, not ours. At Yarvek Station, a civilian fleet drifted in the docking channels. Their autopilot paths were overwritten with recursive origin logs. The flight AI, when queried, insisted, awaiting updated authority. There is no new authority, the hangar control officer said, half to himself. One of the vessels powered down mid-cycle. Its lights winked out in a pattern, matching Earth's oldest orbital traffic handshakes. At Verdanis Prime, Counselor Resk Dorun stood beneath the Council Spire's observation lens. The planet below was visible in strips of starlight and ruin. The upper transport grids pulsed with failure markers, long dead channels still attempting sync with Earth's root frames. Across the lens, small yellow indicators marked where fallback systems had refused Concord commands. The message still pulsed in the center of the Council's main chamber. No one dared remove it. Dorun tapped the interface himself. The reply field refused input. He tried again and again. The console blinked. This path is closed. On Karsiv Trell, engineers dismantled a Terran-built filtration core. It rebooted during removal, issued a compliance check, and then auto-purged every linked sensor. We can't salvage this, said the chief mechanic. Even its death is conditional. By nightfall, multiple sectors began initiating blanket protocol burns, scorched earth deletions of any Earth-licensed infrastructure. Each deletion triggered a system fallback. Instead of vanishing, they rerouted, migrated, or replaced themselves with older Earth builds, less efficient, but just as self-contained. On Valtris Shad, A resource distribution network collapsed under its own redirection weight. The last message before blackout, no valid registry detected. Maintaining integrity. Earth had not sabotaged their systems, they had obeyed, and the systems obeyed Earth. In a high-security chamber, within the remnants of Concord's administrative core, the legal triarch stared at a final archive pulled from Earth's submission record. One clause, one anchor: should Earth withdraw under legal conditions, no retrospective authority shall be applied to nullify its departure. Enforcement of dependency inheritance is the responsibility of the receiving party. Compliance shall remain Earth's only required reply. Chief Arbiter Dren Malvek closed the archive. "We can't fight a message," he said. In Earth's bastion, no celebration echoed, no broadcast aired, no comms channels re-engaged. Merrick Strand stood before a dormant interface, watching the final confirmation cascade into closed threads. Earth had spoken once, and they would not speak again. The galaxy, once full of routing light and chatter, now flickered dim, held not by war, but by a message that required no voice. Not silence as absence, silence as conclusion. "Something's online." The voice came from a lone technician seated at the rear tier of Velkar Array Station, hands trembling over a heads-up interface that had shown nothing but static for 3 days. Now one relay beacon pulsed, slow, dim, unwavering. Commander Tarn Reshvik stood from the control pit's observation rail. He crossed the floor in measured steps, the silence surrounding him vast yet brittle, as though any sound might crack whatever this moment had become. He reached the technician's terminal and stared at the frequency. Not a code, not a demand, just a signal. "Alive. Location?" Reshvik asked. The technician swallowed. "Outer Rim. Earth's archival node. Relay 1K. Reshvik squinted. "That's a museum piece." The pulse continued. No modulation, no broadcast headers, just existence. Across the fractured corridors of Concord Central, surviving officials reassembled in the emergency chamber, its lights low, oxygen thinned by disrupted atmospheric stabilizers. Every screen showed the same data line, rerouted to every government, military and commercial node still connected enough to display anything at all. Earth had activated one satellite. No fleet moved, no announcement followed. The node emitted a simple spatial map, original Concord territory, outlined as if untouched, but with every sector tagged in grayscale and overlaid with Earth's legacy calibration glyphs. The implication was not territorial, it was systemic. In Drozevan Hall, Councillor Resk Dorun stood before a circular display. The Earth seal pulsed in the center, blue, unblemished, wrapped in the laurel of its ancient declaration. "It's not occupation," he murmured. Beside him, Strategic Chief Kelver Indus adjusted his collar with twitching fingers. "Then what is it?" Dorun's voice felt smaller than the room. "Function." Across dozens of fractured worlds, Concord engineers flooded dead relays with hand-coded overrides, desperate to reclaim utility. Each attempt failed. The systems accepted only syntax shaped from Earth's base lexicon. Any deviation triggered a soft reset. In some cases, the systems simply shut down entirely, as if insulted. On Trelos Minor, water reclamation towers restarted without input. The filtration streams pulsed to rhythm counters, pulled from Earth's century-old firmware libraries. No commands were issued. The towers just resumed work, under their own understanding. Trade platforms reconnected sporadically, but not through Concord Registry. Instead, they synced to Earth's legacy merchant beacon system. The old codes, the ones Concord officials had once laughed at during negotiations. At Thaler Crypt Archive, a junior data warden read the final checksum. "It's not guiding," he said quietly. "It's reminding." In Earth's bastion, deep within its subterranean command cradle, no lights flashed, no sirens sang. The core stayed dim, illuminated only by the glow of the single relay they'd reconnected. Merrick Strand stood before it, arms crossed behind his back, watching the ripple spread. He didn't issue a report. There was nothing left to report on. All objectives were met without instruction. Concord had folded not under force, but absence. Behind him, Dalvin Chris spoke for the first time in hours. "They'll adapt." Strand didn't move. "Eventually, they'll try to rewrite what happened. They won't succeed." Outside the observation deck, a single relay drone floated in low orbit. No weapons, no escort, just the Earth seal branded along its side, visible from orbit, not aggressive, not proud, just present. In Rin of Keth, the planetary governor held a council of surviving ministers. Each of them sat around a half-lit table. Data feeds dead, except for one blinking overlay. Supply chain reactivation logs syncing through Earth's sole satellite. "We don't have to kneel," someone whispered. "No," said Governor Lorik Varn, "we just have to use the only tool that still works." On Garneth Sol, children played in the shadow of a transmission dish. Their parents had no channels left to block it, no registry left to intercept. From the dish, nothing loud emitted, just a faint vibration pattern humming through the concrete. One line of text appeared at random intervals, never accompanied by sound or context. It read, "Service continues. Interpret responsibly." That was it. Back in Concord's ruinous central spire, engineers patched together shattered parts of the registry, only to discover that some networks would no longer permit Concord's own administrative handshakes. The systems responded only to Earth's authentication, and Earth issued none. They did not claim jurisdiction. They did not assert law. They simply allowed the galaxy to remain functional, if it used their terms. In the chamber where Earth had once been mocked, the walls were charred, the floor cracked, and the delegates gone. At its center, a projector still flickered, rebooted by unknown hand. It cast a map of known space, every system dim, except one relay, pulsing quietly. Above it, a single glyph, the Earth seal, not a throne, a keystone. No fleets circled it, no treaties followed, but no world ignored it again. In silence, Earth re-entered, not as ruler, not as conqueror, as condition. And beneath that one node, the entire galaxy understood. Earth had withdrawn, not out of weakness, but because it could. They had mocked the silence. Then they collapsed without a sound. And now they stood, every empire, every fleet, every remnant, obedient to a system whose only reply was this. Compliance was never demanded, only observed, and Earth never left.